Hey you and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video we're going to North Carolina for a change to a river called the Catawba. In May 2008, Mark Carver was fishing by the river having a grand old time. However, not far away from him a car would be found. Mark Carver would get wrapped up in this story, and it's really a question of, is it, wrong place, wrong time, or is there more to it? So, let's give it a go, you and I. Come on. The Catawba River in North Carolina is popular with the bit of the L wet stuff. Fishing, swimming, boating, paddling, it's all there. And it was all there on the 5th of May 2008. On that sunny and warm little afternoon, a fella and his girlfriend were out jet skiing. They left a place called Dale's Boat Landing at about 12:30 p.m. and bounded north. As they were bouncing along, they spotted something in a remote stretch on the shore. They were like, it was a car. It looked like it had crashed down the embankment into a tree stump. It was right by the river, the driver's side door open. This obviously looked very suspicious and very out of the place, so they popped over and saw something beside the vehicle. They swiftly called 911.
County 911.
I'm a boater on the Catawba River. Above the I-85 bridge. There's a car that's run off an embankment and there's a body laying there. I don't know if they're alive or not.
We went to see if anything could be done, but it was too late. There was no movement.
The body was that of 20-year-old Ira Yarmolenko. Ira was born in 1988 in Ukraine. Her family immigrated to North Carolina in 1996 as refugees. She had been studying at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, just finishing up the semester with plans to transfer to UNC Chapel Hill in the coming autumn. Ira loved dancing, piano, poetry, hiking, photography.
Jump out there. Ooh, those are pretty nice lips.
On the morning before she was found, she had an exam, had dropped off some stuff at a Goodwill, and popped into a coffee shop where she worked not far from the university. Her car was last seen on CCTV at a YMCA a half-mile from where it ended up. 2 hours later, she was found in the weeds beside her car, along the banks of the Catawba west of Charlotte. At first, investigators thought she could have, ended her own life. But upon closer inspection, it seemed pretty apparent she couldn't have done what happened to her. Ira had been strangled. Around her neck were 3 bindings, a drawstring from her hoodie, a bungee cord, and a blue ribbon. In her hands were some weeds. Her hair and clothing was wet, the ground nearby trampled. And so the police began speaking to and looking for anybody who was in the area that afternoon. And only about 100 yards away down the Catawba, Mark Carver, he was fishing. Mark is a simple man, uncomplicated. In school he was in special education until he dropped out at age 16 to work in a local mill. He has 3 daughters, 1 son, family, hunting, fishing. That's what it's all about. End of. He'd only recently started going to that spot along the Catawba. He'd been there the week before with his cousin, Neil Cassada, and a few others. He said it was a handy spot. He could drive down to the shore and didn't have to haul his boat in and out, as his hands, they were weak. He had carpal tunnel syndrome, and complications from surgery left him with little to no grip. Now, we all know where this is going. So, did Mark and Neil have a history of violence? No, not particularly. In 1995, Neil was accused of assault. Charges dismissed. In 2005, Mark allegedly confronted and shot at 2 people he thought were stealing his truck. Again, dismissed. In 2007, apparently Mark was wrestling with his son when his gun went off and his son was wounded. Again, dismissed. Wrestling? Gun went off? They're simple folk. That morning, the 5th of May, Mark had picked up a salt block and he needed an employee to lift it, into his truck. He had no strength. He then met up with his cousin Neil. They popped down to that fishing spot looking to get something good. I don't know the first thing about fishing. Way before Ira was found. They both insisted they never saw her or her car. When the police arrived at 2 p.m, Neil Cassida had already gone home. Mark was still there fishing away when the police spoke to him. After speaking with them, he left at 2:30 to pick up his daughters from school, and then again later on that day he returned to that fishing spot to pick up his fishing net. Now, a motive for Ira's death, right, was very hard to establish, right? There was no signs of sexual assault, no robbery, nothing was stolen. Now, one thing as well, it was found that via the car's onboard computer that somebody was in the driver's seat when the car went down that embankment and crashed into the tree stump. So, was Ira dead in the car and then was moved, her body was moved, or was she alive when she went down the embankment and crashed, got out, and then something else happened? There was no reason for her to be there in such a remote spot, though her brother would say it's not surprising she would go somewhere like that to take some pictures. A photographer from UNC told police she had said she wanted to photograph people kayaking and water sporting along the river a week before. Though why she was there, it wasn't so much the issue. It was, everything else.
Ira's body was laying right here. Her feet are down at this end and her head is at where your feet are at right here. So the vehicle is actually sitting right here with the driver's door open and the back door open. Tree stump right there, straight down, is what her vehicle actually hit. And there we do still have some questions about that, whether it was under power when it went down through there. Obviously, when it's sitting at the stump, it is under power because the front wheels are spinning. I'm not going to try to explain why the front wheels were spinning. All we know is that they were spinning. The actual keys to the vehicle were right up in this area here. How she got outside the vehicle, well, we can play the what if. Obviously, I don't know how she ended up in the position that she was. We have taken the vehicle and taken it over to Belmont and stored it in their facilities over there for security, and we have done an inventory inside the vehicle.
Fingerprints?
We did a latent print search as to what's happened with any that they found. I haven't been instructed as to what's happened with those. Mount Holly's, we are a small town. We have limited resources, and all I did was call for extra resources. I made another call to the SBI. I said, can we do some more?
You said you had some pretty good leads. Do you still have them?
Yes. I had a short conversation with the detectives before we came out here, and they're still following up on the leads. We are convinced that someone did that to her. So that's how our investigation is proceeding.
When you say someone did that to her, can you kind of explain someone drove? Someone
caused her death. Now, whether they drove that vehicle down there, I can't tell you that. If they pulled her out of the vehicle, I can't tell you that either. Simply because I do not know. But I know someone caused her death, and that's who we're trying to find.
As the investigation began, investigators didn't think much about Mark Carver or his cousin Neil Cassida. Some thought she may have in fact done this to herself, though that seemed far-fetched. The medical examiner ruled it a homicide. There were 3 bindings around her neck, and the medical examiner said she would have lost consciousness quickly, within about 15 seconds, and couldn't have done all 3. In fact, it would be months before any real clues would be uncovered, even with a $15,000 reward on offer. There was about 8 people in that area when Ira died. All of them were ruled out, except for Mark and Neil. And it was mainly the fact that they were a mere 100 yards away, but they both said they neither saw nor heard anything, and that's what drew the police in. Police stated that this was impossible. They should have heard something, as a person could be heard, quote, speaking in a normal tone of voice 100 yards away in that area. However, Elizabeth Leland, a reporter from the Charlotte Observer, went there to the scene, and 100 yards away could barely hear someone else even yelling. Now, Mark and Neil fully cooperated with the police, allowed their DNA to be taken. Neil passed a polygraph. Mark asked for one, but was never given one. And in December 2008, the real break was made. Neil and Mark's DNA was found in 3 different places in Ira's car. Now, all the samples contained a mix of DNA, but the predominant DNA profiles were that of Mark and Neil. You'll see in this interview from December 2008 that Mark is quite a simple fella.
You're not working that hard.
No,
Just saying.
yeah.
But you worked in the mill, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. So I got crippled.
How you crippled?
I got carpal tunnel. And tenderitis in my elbows.
And you go to the river to go fishing. About what time was it when you got there?
It was about 10 or 11.
10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. Okay? So you get down there, and the whole time you're there, from the time you got there to the time you left, the only person you saw was Neil Casada. Is that correct?
Yeah. Neil was the only one I seen.
Now you said you were down there until the police come.
You know, one of the main things in the investigation was that the police found it unbelievable that Mark and Neil didn't hear anything, when in this interview, Mark said he did hear something.
And like I say, me and Neil heard a scrape.
Okay, what kind of scrape? Define the scrape.
It sounded like a tractor scraping the road.
Was there somebody up there working on a tractor scraping the road close by?
I didn't pay attention.
But you didn't see a tractor scraping the road.
No, I didn't see nothing.
You just heard something sound like a tractor scraping the
Yeah.
road. So that was before Neil left.
Yeah.
Neil heard that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we didn't pay no attention.
Okay. Y'all just kept fishing.
I just kept fishing.
All right. So the whole time you were there, even when Neil was there, you didn't see anybody. Neil didn't see anybody. Didn't hear anything. Didn't see anything.
We heard something.
The scrape.
The scrape.
Other than the scrape and the jet skis.
I hadn't seen nothing.
Didn't see anything. Did you see that little girl's car? Did you see that little girl?
I ain't never seen nothing.
Did you touch that little girl's car? Did you go inside that little girl's car? You're positive.
I'm positive.
You never saw a car.
No, I never saw a car.
How did you know a girl was killed down there? This is important. How did
Over TV.
you say it on the TV?
I seen it on TV.
What did the TV tell you?
Said she was strangled to death.
Said she was strangled to death. How was she strangled to death?
They said she was strangled to death.
Didn't tell. Say how.
No.
All
I
right.
wish I could help you.
Oh, you're helping me a lot, man. You don't realize how much you're helping me. You're making my day.
But if I could get my hands on him,
What would you do?
I'd kill him.
How'd you kill him?
Choke him to death.
Choke him to death? Who do you think done it?
I don't know.
How would you choke him? Well, did you ever hear her scream for help?
No. I ain't even hear it. I ain't hear it scream.
You didn't hear her scream at all. She didn't make a sound, did she? They got their hands around her throat quick, didn't they? Snuffed her out.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Had to be somebody big and strong.
Like so, bigger than her. She was a little bitty thing like you. How much bigger she weigh?
Probably about 110 pounds.
I got one thing that's bothering me that I need to talk to you.
There's just one other thing, sir.
Do you know what DNA is?
Yeah.
What is it?
It can be DNA out of that.
Yeah, like the sample you get.
Yeah.
And you know that DNA is like a fingerprint.
Yeah.
It's just for you. Your DNA is different than mine. Mine's different than his. And so on and so forth. I found your DNA inside her car. How can you explain it?
No, you didn't find mine.
Yeah, I did. Found yours and Neil's brother. Not only went around the car, you were in the car.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah, you were. I mean, I'm not going to argue with you. What I am going to do is give you the opportunity to give your side of the story.
I told you to. Y'all didn't find my DNA.
Well, we did.
No, you didn't. No,
I like you. I think we got a lot in common, but I will not tolerate somebody lying to me. And that's exactly what you're doing.
In December 2008, they were both charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy.
We begin tonight with 2 arrests in the murder of a college student from Chapel Hill.
Ira Yarmolenko spent 2 years at UNC Charlotte. Her body was found not far from there in Mount Holly. And that's where police made an announcement this morning. Bruce Mildworth spoke with her family after the news had had a bit of time to sink in. Bruce?
The family is still very much in pain and overwhelmed. Police arrested 2 men, but say the investigation is still ongoing. In an effort not to hurt the case, police have not released details about a possible motive or what led to the arrests. At the bottom of an embankment along the Catawba River back in May, 20-year-old Ira Yarmolenko was found dead beside her car. Police say she was suffocated.
This thing that has happened has always just sort of eaten at us.
With no arrests in the first 7 months since she was killed,
I was pretty angry.
Her family was in constant contact with investigators.
There have been stretches when we talked every day.
The call early Friday morning is the one they were waiting for. 2 Gaston County men were arrested, 40-year-old Mark Carver and 54-year-old Neil Quesada, both charged with murder and conspiracy.
Right now we're really overwhelmed and we don't know how to interpret all of it.
With a sense of relief, her older brother was hoping for a sense of closure. Instead, with upcoming court dates and trials, he says the arrests may just prolong the grieving process.
I'm not sure if any of this is really comforting.
What he says is comforting are the memories of a warm and giving person. Just hours before her body was found, a surveillance video captures Yarmolenko dropping off bags of clothes and other items at Goodwill. Her brother says because of his younger sister's passion for the arts, her spirit will live on.
She knew how to make people smile. And when people read her poetry and read whatever else she's been writing, I think they'll get to know a really incredible person.
Mark and Neil, denied they had anything to do with what happened to Ira. They both swear they're completely innocent. They have no idea how their DNA was found in her car, but they weren't there.
Were you with Mr. Quesada?
I don't even know the girl. I've never seen her my whole life.
Were you fishing with your cousin?
Yeah, that's my cousin.
And that's Mr. Quesada?
No, Neil
What's
Cassidy.
What's that? Cassidy. Okay. Have they ever explained to you what they thought you did? Why they believe that you're their man?
They had evidence I done, and I didn't do it. I didn't go around the car, and no one near the car, and nothing.
If you could say something to this young woman's family right now, what would you say?
I tell them I hate it happened. I want to catch the right one. I feel sorry for her because I got 2 more.
Did you submit a DNA sample to police?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Why'd you do that?
Not to prove I was innocent.
Could your cousin have done this and not you?
No, I don't think he did. I don't think we've been framed.
By who?
By the police.
The 2 men were going to be tried separately, right? And the defenses for both men were extremely confident they would win. They thought the prosecution's case was soft as baby shit. I don't know anything about lawyering, but that was a very bad idea. But Mark and Neil, they didn't seem like the kind of people who would do something like this to a young woman for seemingly no reason at all. The evidence against wasn't strong. The DNA wasn't exactly like a full bang-on match. There were no fingerprints found on the car. Nothing was found on Ira. There was no DNA under her fingernails, like she had put up a struggle or anything like that. So the prosecution, they didn't have a motive, right? And there was nothing linking them. They didn't know each other. And there was nothing, taken from her. So they invented one. So you got proof, right? And then you got imagination. Ira loved photography. She could have been at the river to take pictures when she took one of Mark and Neil doing something they shouldn't have been doing. And so, they went for her. One held her down while the other wrapped ligatures around her neck. They then put her in the car and pushed it down the embankment when it hit the stump. They went down and tried to get rid of her body in the river, which is why it was wet. But they gave up on that when her body wouldn't sink and just left her there in the weeds. Then Neil went home, Mark went back fishing. Needed to clear his head. Ira's camera was found in the car's trunk. No film though. They said Mark and Neil destroyed it. Neil's trial was scheduled to begin in October 2010. However, the day before his trial was about to start, he was at breakfast table reading in the newspaper an account of the case. He got up, went into the shower, and died of a heart attack. After his death, the prosecutors went back to Mark and offered him a plea deal, right? Plead guilty to second-degree murder. You'll be out in less than 14. Mark turned them down, said he didn't do it. During the trial, one of the strongest pieces of evidence, for the prosecution was that during Mark's interrogation, he was accurately able to describe Ira's height, even though he said he never met her.
He said that she came up to him about right here.
The defense put up little to no fight for Mark. They called no witnesses of their own, no evidence. The conspiracy charge would be dismissed. But on the 21st of March 2011, Mark was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison with no parole.
This is a travesty of our justice system, or lack of. No DNA on the camera. There was no DNA anywhere except maybe on what they say the trunk. DNA can be transferred. Do people not do their research? Do people not take the time? Election season comes up, and we need to catch somebody so that somebody can get reelected. And it's not right. And it's not right to put an innocent man in prison for the rest of his life and to destroy the lives of two families.
Justice was done here, and it was so incredible watching all these people put everything they had into this case. And so we're very thankful to everyone for it.
This would be upheld in 2012, despite a judge saying it should be dismissed due to lack of evidence. Upheld again in 2013 by the Supreme Court of North Carolina. The DNA was obviously key in getting him sent away. Though his DNA being found there could have been via secondary transfer, someone touching Mark, then touching the car. Or perhaps the lab made some kind of mix-up. During those subsequent appeals, a number of things would come out about how maybe the jury was a little bit misled into who Mark was and what he had said. The interrogation, right, where Mark could accurately describe Ira's height, even though he said he never met her, so the only way he would know that is yada yada yada. Well, it turned out that Mark was just mimicking the investigator. During that interrogation, the investigator said to Mark, she'd be about, this height.
She wasn't much taller than you? No. If y'all were standing up looking at each other in the eye, did she be looking you in the eyes? Yeah, show me, stand up, show me about how tall she was on you.
Probably about right there.
Okay.
I guess. And I don't know.
Yeah, I understand.
Yes.
Okay.
He didn't know, he just did what the investigator did. And also, the jury were never shown the video where he does it. They were just told this when the interrogator took the stand. Which is another thing the defense could have, cross-examined, and they didn't. The defense obviously should have called witnesses, particularly doctors, right, who could have said that Mark was physically incapable of doing to Ira what had been done. He wasn't strong enough to do it. And Neil, too, had heart issues. He had had a heart attack before the one that killed him. The North Carolina Center on Actual Innocence took up Mark's case and his new defense. And in 2019, an appeal was successful. It was on the grounds that, well, one, the jury were never shown the interrogation video. Touch DNA also became a major factor. They argued that's why his DNA was found in the car.
New technology helped exonerate the Ramsey family. Touch DNA analysis found the DNA of an unidentified male on JonBenét's long john.
Criminal justice and DNA. Well, you probably think if you found DNA at a crime scene, it's pretty damning proof that the owner of that DNA committed the crime. Well, think again. My guests today have published an article in the Journal of Forensic Sciences titled, "Could Secondary DNA Transfer Falsely Place Someone at the Scene of a Crime?"
For example, when the police first met Mark that day, when, they were canvassing the area, looking for any witnesses or whatever, They met Mark. Mark gave the officer his license and shook his hand. And you can get like skin cells. That's DNA from one person, A to B to C. After the officer met Mark, the car was examined again. DNA from the car was only swabbed 2 months after the case began. Also, Mark's original defense was poor at best. No witnesses to show his medical background or the fact that he had a very low IQ. Mark's conviction, it was overturned. His charges still stand though, and a new trial can be ordered. However, he is now out of jail, paid the $100,000 bond, or rather another exonerated person did, and is wearing an ankle monitor. The district attorney has said he will challenge the ruling, and if he fails, a new trial will start up. Though this was back in the autumn of 2019, and, well, there hasn't been much released since then.
What's the first thing you're going to do now that you're free?
Go see my grandbaby.
There's no evidence left in this case. All the evidence that was used, that was false evidence used at trial to convict him, has been decimated. There's nothing left.
And one strange moment as he was released walking across this parking lot, and just up the way there, the district attorney also leaving, getting into his car. The district attorney drove away. Seconds later, Mark Carver drove away, both taking the same path out of the parking lot, but headed in different directions. Carver going home with his family, still wearing a GPS monitor. The district attorney said that he's going to start now work to try to get his conviction for murder upheld and have Mark Carver sent back to prison.
So, what actually happened to Ira Yarmolenko? I don't know. Some think she may have in fact ended her own life. There's not, terribly much evidence, if you discount Mark and Neil, that someone else was there. The reason they went for Mark and Neil was, almost like lack of options, though lack of options doesn't equal guilty. There was not really any trauma on her body, not much to speak of. Though she wasn't thought of as depressed, but then again, you don't need to be. She also donated a lot of her things to Goodwill the morning she died. Her family think Mark did it. Personally, I don't. I think he's innocent, though I've been wrong before. So, he doesn't seem capable of doing it, other than that very kind of finicky DNA that could be touch DNA. That was just transferred there inadvertently. There's not really other stuff to go on that he did it physically. Other witnesses, have since stated that on the day of Ira's death, they saw a young, white, stocky guy driving a car very like Ira's down the highway, and then later on they saw that same guy walking away from where her car would be found along the highway. That report was, given to police. Not really much has come of it. Another witness saw a black male running up the hill from where her car was found. He looked like apparently he was wet or covered in sweat and had a bag under his arm, maybe a book bag. It's another possibility. You can see why the police would go after Mark and Neil. There's very little, other than some witness reports, that somebody else was there. Not really much evidence. Though then again, there's not much evidence Mark and Neil were there either. So, long story short, who knows? Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please let me know, by the way, your thoughts on this case in the usual place, and I will see you, as always, real soon in the next video. Take care of yourselves. Mike out.